So I'm supposed to present on church finance, and like I've indicated there, God is the owner and man is the administrator. The church was defined by previous presenters. I think the first presenter, Pastor Muvuti, said much about the church, what it is. Then finance, we are looking at how resources are managed, monetary resources. So you bring the two together, church finance. We are basically looking at how monetary resources are managed within our church. Many times we have been presented with questions like, why does the church send all the tithe money to the conference? Does it sound common? How do those who work in the offices use that money? Is it true that part of the funds go to the GC? Why do we send money from here going there? And also, how can I trust the financial system of the church? Or would it be better to give my money directly to other ministries? And I'm sure most of us, if not all of us, at some point we have attempted to answer these questions and many other questions which come along with similar inquiries. But the question is, in our attempts, are we really representing what the position of the church? Sometimes there's the risk that we may misrepresent the position of the church when it comes to some of these processes. And in responding to some of these questions, I may have my own personal opinion or my personal view or my personal conviction. But we're speaking on behalf of the church or the organization. Our message should be what the organization or church stands for. And my personal opinions, my personal views aside, as individuals, sometimes we struggle with that because in a personal conviction young, but it may be different from the church's position. So it is my wish and prayer that when faced with such a temptation, may we be able to resist that and speak on behalf of the organization, present what the organization stands for, presents what the correct position of the church, regardless of what personally I may feel or what personally I may be convinced of. So we are faced with many such questions, but for today, I will not really attempt to answer these common questions, but I will attempt just to present an overall governance picture of our finances as a church. So it will be good to start by sharing the process flow of church funds. And I'm taking this from the church manual as it is written there. The gathering and the handling of funds for the Lord's work is a sacred responsibility. It's a sacred responsibility. And when we first understand that the resources are God's resources, and the work is His work. Then we should approach this work understanding that it is sacred. This is a sacred responsibility. But the channel, it entails money flowing first from the member at the local church, where the treasurer receives those funds. Then the treasurer also has the disbursements, and the treasurer at the same time is holding in trust and passes what is due to the conference. Then the conference will do the same with the union. The union will do the same with the division of the general conference. As that work proceeds, the disbursement of funds is only by action or authority of responsible committees. We'll look into that, and I'm happy Dr. Chijande has also touched on those issues. So this flow of funds, which I've just highlighted, is not just a mere flow of funds, but we need to see it as a strategy. Let's see it as a strategy, a mission strategy. And it rides on an existing structure. We'll look at that. And also, that's our culture as a church. That's our culture as a church, and it exists to finance the mission. So the need to finance the mission, it led us to the financial system that we are talking of today. So as a worker of the church, as a pastor, I need to know, how does the church get its money? And how does the church manage its money? Sometimes we get into discussions where we are not quite sure about how the money is managed. But we'll try, and it will not be exhaustive. We will not exhaust everything, but we'll touch a few elements here and there. So God instituted this financial strategy as a way to eliminate man's egoism and motivate him to recognize God as owner. So this strategy, this financial strategy, it thrives on us recognizing God as the owner. You take that away, we see man's egoism at play. Man's egoism from the member who is bringing the resources, man's egoism from the treasurer who is managing those resources, man's egoism on the part of the pastor who is managing the local church, egoism at the conference, egoism at the union, and throughout the chain. And imagine the kind of chaos that we are to create if everything is driven on the basis of man's egoism, and God is out of the strategy. So it only thrives first by recognizing that God is the owner and it belongs to God. Man's egoism aside, and God at the center of the work. So that part of our faith, they preach that part of our faith which will not create opposition and displease their ears. Invitation, because the subject of money is quite catchy, it's quite enticing, it's quite interesting, and in so doing, we may end up teaching people according to what pleases their ears. And sometimes it may not be what the organization stands for. And this strategy, which I have pointed to earlier on, by so doing, we end up derailing the strategy. His people do not give him in tithes and offerings that which is his own, and the minister who labors with them and who does not show them the plainly revealed will of God is brought under condemnation with the people because he neglects his duty. If we neglect our duty, we will be brought under condemnation for neglecting the for neglecting duty. So as leaders, we should instruct our church members to grow in their understanding of this strategy. It's a strategy. It's not just a mere a mere way of doing things. So when we understand that it's a strategy for mission, church finance is a strategy for mission, then we already, from the context of the great controversy, it will not be surprising that the enemy is out there also to fight this strategy. Although currently we can say we have a strong and well-organized financial system, but we should remain alert because of the great controversy. We should remain alert. The enemy is well acquainted, but the mission will be driven by money. He knows that money is key to advancing this work. So he also comes in to put stumbling blocks along the way. So we need to pay attention so as not to allow some of these stumbling blocks, such as false teachings, that may infiltrate and damage the flock of God. It's a strategy to drive the mission. The enemy knows that, and the enemy is not at sleep. He also comes in to try and put stumbling blocks to that strategy. So the next time we face challenges within the financial strategy, challenges of whatever nature, let's approach those with this understanding that we are at war. And how do we fight this war? This war, we win enyama, isi wondo zenyama, but this is a spiritual warfare, which will be manifesting itself financially. But let's not detach issues of finance and place them somewhere there outside the context of the great controversy. But issues of finances, the enemy is out there to fight the issues of finances. So let's talk about the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Who are we? And so you look at that policy, SID working policy B05, it will say the Seventh-day Adventist Church is both a local and a global identity. We have an identity, Semasabata. We have an identity, Semasabata. And the way we manage those finances, it's also speaking to who are we as the Adventists. So we have a local and global identity. There are things which are just not part of us as Adventists. Let's continue to then unpack this thing of local and global identity. So, locally, the local church, that is what the Pope is saying. You read it, it will tell you that the local church is indeed a genuine expression of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, but its identity cannot be fully defined or viewed in isolation from its relationships with other local churches and other levels of denominational organization. So we are part of an ecosystem. like what Dr. Chishande said, we are part of an ecosystem. So these local and global elements, they work together per this identity that we are talking about. And if someone wants to really see who are we as Adventists, it's expressed in our documents, the church manual, the working policies, and these reflect the aspects of self-governance and interrelationships. So our identity is carried in those documents. And the question now is to say, is it what the local church, the local member, the local pastor, employee is also exhibiting, or there is a disconnect between this identity that we find in our manuals and our policies and this kind of identity that we are expressing out there? Are we representing the identity of the church as the way it is outlined within our manuals and our policies? So the church manual and the policies present the collective voice of the Adventists regarding our belief, relationships, and so forth, and also our operational procedures. So these make up our identity as the church. Then now we zeroing in within the financial system, we find that there are two environments. There's the environment of mission funding and an environment of responsibility regarding the use of the resources that finance the mission church. So our manuals, our policies are crafted and are presenting that as Adventists, this is the environment that we have created for this system to fund mission. But when we're on the ground, do we see have we created an environment of responsibility which dovetails with the environment which the manuals and the policies seek to create, or these two are detached? Let's see now. It is now the responsibility of leadership to manage this environment kanataku implementer so that it tallies with what the organization is seeking on a bigger picture. And so it's upon us as leaders, as pastors, we are leaders in the respective areas where we are serving. We must model a behavior that is guided by these instruments with commitment to ethics, transparency, and accountability. And we need to sustain the confidence by open communication among different stakeholders and working well with the committees and so forth. But beyond modeling behavior, it is imperative for leaders to promote and design the most appropriate systems that will safeguard the resources which are used to support the mission of the church. Isusema leaders, we create the appropriate system. At a local church, we create the appropriate system. But the good thing is, takapiwa manots of how to do it. So we'll be going through those issues, but already you can see that there's need to establish financial controls, zino minimize ama risk, zino safeguard ama resources. There's need for accurate record keeping, foster accountability, deter fraud, efficient operations, and also to protect each other from false accusations. If we operate within the provisions of these policies and so forth, then we are protected from false accusations. But we do it outside them, then we are vulnerable. We're exposing ourselves to false accusations if we operate outside those provisions. The church defines its internal governance as representative. I think this is my boards and my committees. What I want from this one is that there is a responsibility. Our work comes with responsibility and authority. But this responsibility and authority is coming to us through constitutions, through my policies and my guidelines. So where one feels that I have authority over A, B, and C, one should be able to trace that authority to the policies and guidelines and the constitution. If I fail to trace that authority to these documents, then I should rethink, am I actually authorized to do it or not? I may be knowledgeable, I may be enthusiastic, but these policies and guidelines, do they authorize me to do what I am about to do? It's possible that we may have people, individuals, whom policies and guidelines assign responsibilities and authorities, but they may not be knowledgeable. So this culture of sharing notes, sharing ideas, it then helps us so that Chese tinokwanisa kunzwisisa. Oh, I'm a pastor, I'm authorized, these are my responsibilities, but I may not be knowledgeable in ABCD. And I would want to applaud the organizers of this platform, it then helps us to appraise each other on what is expected of us. Then this policy says decision-making is based on group processes that allow for member participation. When it comes to issues of church finance, financial decisions, these are not solo activities. This policy is saying decision-making is based on group processes. Before I make a major decision, I should ask myself, which group have I consulted before we run with this decision that we are about to make? If it is a major decision, then there should have been a group process involved in the process. If that is lacking, you need to think twice. Then we talked that the church, Pastor Jande spoke about the local church conference, the building blocks, and so forth. The constituency carries the privilege of decision-making and deliberations. He spoke about this. Right. So organizational status is granted to a constituency as a trust. When a church is organized, it is an act of trust. If a conference is organized by the higher organization, it is an act of trust. The same with the union. If it is an act of trust. Where is trust coming in? Trust is coming in pakuti. Maybe if it was in the business world or anywhere else, we could be talking of a brand. To say, like Maspa Atinoona Aya, that's a brand. And for someone to be given that brand, which you can operate as a spa. SPA is trust in those operating that outlet to say they will operate it in a way that represents SPA. So we are saying, can a church organize one? Is that status yapiwa as an act of trust. Trust that this congregation or this group of people will transact their business in a way that represents who we are as Adventists. And where does it come from? It comes from these manuals and these policies. So it's an act of trust. And it says membership and status can be reviewed or revised, withdrawn by level that granted it. When it is seen that this unit has now betrayed the trust that was bestowed upon them, the higher level that granted that status can withdraw that status because the trust has been violated. And on those issues of trust, you will see that financial issues also come into play. They are not sidelined to the peripheries, but they are also key when we look at issues of granting organizational status. Like I said, I'm just looking at governance issues from a broader perspective without really touching on the nitty-gritties of the operational day-to-day issues that take place at the local church. Whilst that is important, but I think it is important first to understand this level, and then we appreciate how those day-to-day activities fit into this broader picture of governance. So that is a church. It's of people who are organized in harmony with the manual. They should operate in harmony with the manual. So let's look at decision making at the local church. I said it is a group process. The highest level authority granted to each denominational organization, the highest level is the constituents meeting. Pastor Jande Wataura, what is the constituents meeting? This policy then says, in a local church, the constituents or membership meeting is generally called the church business meeting. So in the highest level of authority at a local church. I know someone is saying, but how about the conference and so forth? Local church, highest level of authority rests with the constituents meeting. But to answer you on that one now, this policy then says, this decision making at the unit, the organization, in this case, the local church. Policies, it is within the policies that are applicable to the level and status of the organization concerned. So we cannot have a church just saying we are a church, the business meeting is responsible, so we can make any decision. We should be mindful that there are policies applicable to the level and the status of each organization. Then it speaks to the nature of the decisions that we can do as that administrative unit. So different elements of organizational authority and responsibility are distributed among various levels of denominational organization. So zvinenderana nemazera organization could at this level the decisions are within this and zvichikascada zvichidaro. And like Paya, I think it was Dr. Mtanga, who then says you can't expect a local church to employ to make a decision on employing of a local church pastor. Then also you can't expect a conference to make a decision regarding the ordination of ministers, as that is entrusted to the union, and also denominational beliefs, that is for the general conference. So as a pastor, before I tackle issues who church business meeting, it is important also to know where I'm not sure to consult. I'm going for a business meeting, the agenda is this, but on this item, I'm not quite sure if, as a local church, it is within our policies to entertain a discussion on this matter. Remember, we are talking about finances, and you'll see how all this now feeds into financial decisions. All organizations and institutions in the world should recognize the authority of the General Conference as the highest authority of the Seventh-day Adventist Church that is under God. So we have God, and below we have the General Conference. But you may have encountered situations whereby a lower entity is challenging the authority of the General Conference. And when that happens, what has happened to that trust which existed when that organization was granted denominational status? What has happened to that trust? So these policies, they feed into each other. Even as we look into issues of finance, they follow the same line of thinking, even as we make financial decisions. And of course, we cannot ignore the fact that organizations, there's a relationship between organizations. Whilst each organization is its constituency, in the case of a local church, is the church business meeting, but there's that interrelationship. But this policy says no church organization or entity assumes responsibility for the liabilities, debts, acts, or omissions of any other church organization simply because of its church affiliation. Hapana organization icha assume ma liabilities or ma responsibilities eimwe organization. So I know my local churches, there are issues they could we make a decision as a local church, but in the process, you know, repercussions. And we run to the conference. Kuno kwaitika zakati, we are facing liability, kwazoitika this and that. The spirit of this policy is to say, let's be responsible for the decisions that we make as a local church, as a conference, as a union, division, general conference. Hapana ended ichauya ichi assume ma liabilities, ma debts, security, and so forth. This is the spirit of this policy. Of course, I understand that my policies edu are subjected to the laws of the land. I'm not from the legal legal side. Of course, there are issues of the local laws that come into play to say at what point does the higher organization then assume responsibility and so forth. But those are legal discussions. But from these policies, kanatine zvikwereti zvedu zvatinazvo where we are, kanatine liabilities and so forth, there's no organization that is expected to come and take responsibilities for such. So let's be careful in the decisions that we make. This one, kana tichiti higher organization and so forth, we do it for descriptive purposes. And it's not meant to define a legal relationship or create liability unless otherwise specifically stated. So we need not to be reckless in financial decisions, to be careless. Tichita, after all, the conference, after all, there's the union. No. When we say higher organization, it's just for descriptive purposes so that our structure is understood, and it's not for the purpose of creating liabilities. So why do we need policies? Because policies now come into for structural stability. Structural stable, but as we stabilize, our policies also are cognizant that our circumstances differ, and they are clear on what they give us guidelines to not say when environments differ and so forth. So they come with that level of flexibility. So they are not that rigid to say takutotadza kushanda because policy yatitadzisa kushanda, but it comes, it's about identifying that policy provision which allows us or which affords us a certain level of flexibility. So the church manual, the standards and practices of the church are based upon the principles set up forth in the church manual. So my practices at upper church, they are set within the church manual. They are to be followed religiously. So let's look at financial oversight at the local church. If the church manual is our guiding tool when it comes to management of local church affairs, then let's refer to it about financial oversight and authority. It mentions of the treasurer. It says the custodian of all church funds. When we say all church funds, we mean every cent, be it conference funds, whilst they are still at the local church, local funds, and other auxiliary organizations. The custodian is the treasurer. So, because of this important function, sometimes it may be found wise for continuity yema treasurers, but I want to highlight this one. Yakati, the treasurer is responsible to the church board. Pastor works close. I mean, this should be pastor works closely with the treasurer. Okay, you can edit that. Pastor works closely with the treasurer. There are times when the pastor is tempted to give major instructions to the treasurer. Instructions or decisions which are supposed to come from the church board or through the church business meeting, but you find that sometimes we get it mixed up. And at the end of the day, the treasurer is saying, the pastor said, the pastor told me to. I did this because the pastor said. The pastor works closely with the treasurer, but the treasurer's responsibility is to the church board. Then sometimes the work is too much and so forth. Then this page 138 says the board can choose to appoint committees to take care or to work with the treasurer. That's why Tinima building committees, we can as well have a finance committee. The board should consider details of church business and receive, this has been mentioned, and also the church business meeting, Ratawa. But what is the work of this treasurer? If you go to our policies, working policies, it will say the work of the treasurer or CFO is, among other things, it includes the receipt, safeguarding, and disbursing. So treasurer charungoita pa local church is to receive, to safeguard, and to disburse. And we need to see, how do you receive? How do you safeguard this disburse? Everything is at our disposal. We follow that, we are safeguarded. We operate outside it, we have exposed ourselves to unnecessary issues. So what do we receive? What does the treasurer receive? Conference funds. And as we receive these monies, remember, God says can move people who are not members of organization, resources to contribute to the advancement of the church. Tino receiver. Kana zvadaro. Kwete kuti uya asinhengo saka ati receive mari yake. No. God has moved people even outside who are not members of the organization to receive. So we receive conference funds, local church funds, and auxiliary funds. Let's look at, we are still on receiving. Church manual page 89 says the church will give receipts for all funds received. I underline all funds received. Proper methods to be used. Gatishan say my envelopes edu. This is the church manual. Clearly labeled envelopes or any other method which is approved by the conference. Those are our proper methods. Other methods which are not approved by the conference, they will lead us into other issues. So all receipts should be issued promptly for all money received, no matter how small offerings should be received. Then all offerings not in envelopes. Kune mari dzinoya dzisiri envelopes. But because paitwa collection, kana iri collection a general offering, mari iyoyo
5 more minutes.
should be
5 more
in the
minutes.
presence of the treasurer, officer, madikoni. Kana dikoni wawerenga wapa treasurer mari, mudikoni ngapiwe receipt yake. That receipt ndo ichawa proof yemudikoni kuti ndakasvitsa mari kuna treasurer. Then after receiving, we safeguard. Safeguarding has 2 levels. There's a level to safeguard the money itself. Then there's a level of safeguarding the purpose of the money. Let's look at those 2. Safeguarding the money, I think it's something we know kuti mari inofana kuchengetedzeka, and it should be deposited into a bank account. It should be deposited into a bank account. Mari ngatisagari mumapilo kana pasi pemamattress tichitya mabank charges and so forth. Kana tichitya those things, ngatitsvage dzimwe means but dziri secure. Then, because at the end of the day, if anything happens, we'll be asked, why were we not banking that money? Let's talk about safeguarding the purpose. All funds contributed by individuals for specific purposes must be used for that purpose. There are times when money is received for A, B, C, D, but at some point we are told, the board thought building is more pressing at the moment. So the board has made a decision that those monies, let's use them towards building. The church board, neither the treasurer nor the church board has authority to divert those funds. Tithe shall not be used in any way by the local church, but it's held in trust and remitted to the local conference. Again, safeguarding the purpose. Kana offering yatorwa, tirikutora mupiro wechakati. Mari yose yaiswa mu plate or mu whatever, during collection, it's deemed kuti it's for that purpose. We don't expect anoya achiti, ndakakanganisa ndakaisa mari pa yechakati pa collection. Kana mari yato collectwa ya placed tichiti tiri ku collecta mari yechakati, mari yese iri kuiswa imomo is for that purpose. Unless munhu aisa envelope yaka indicatwa kuti imari yechi, then the rest can be for the collection yaitwa, but because the envelope is specifying this, we respect what the donor has said. Then my auxiliary funds, for example, tiri kurana crash pa church, that is kana zvaka approved zve crash nema relevant vane authority yoyo. Kana kuti youth ine fund yayo yairi kuita, maybe through their treasurer they are raising mari, let's say ye GYT. My youth pamwana treasurer vayo and so forth, but kana va collector mari dzose idzodzo dzinochengetwa na treasurer we church. Treasurer wema groups and so forth exists just for logistics and for record keeping. Then to safeguard also, we need the most satisfactory plan is the budget plan. Tikagadzira budget, it was represented by Dr. Chijandi. Tikagadzira budget, we are ring fencing Mariette. We are ring fencing Mariette kuti pashaye anozo divert ma funds. It's an issue of safeguarding the purpose. It's known that we agreed kuti mari ikauya, we are going to use it in this way, and it has been voted, it has been agreed. Any deviation from that, it should come back to the business meeting, to the church board, to amend and take a vote of amendment. That way, we are safeguarding the purpose of the funds. So the responsibility lies with the officers of the organization or per local church, my leaders, Edo Aripo, ndo are responsible for day-to-day running. Then the responsibility for internal controls, the responsibility to design, document, and implement and communicate them and to monitor them. And the effectiveness of internal controls will be determined to a large degree by the tone set by those entrusted with leadership and governance of the organization. But controlling board executive committee ndo iri responsible for my internal controls. Ma circumstances ari ku church iri kumuzarabani anogona kusiyana nema circumstances ane church yepa Bluffview. Saka ma leaders eipapo ndo anotogara otoona kuti nechimiro chiri pa church pedu panapo kuti mari yedu ichengetedzeke tinotofanira kudai totodai. Of course, the conference has designed an instrument, REMA guidelines, NEMA internal controls, which I think we've been given before. It would be good even to take a step further as a church board or church business meeting to take an action to adopt that instrument and to take an action of commitment that we shall operate within the provisions of these controls. My time is up, but I have a few slides remaining just to wind up on the issue of disbursement. We've talked about receiving, safeguarding. The last issue is disbursement. Mr. Coordinator, if that is allowed.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so per disbursements, I am a conference funds atasangana nawo ku receiving. Police manual yedu irikut at the close of each month or more often if requested by the conference, such should be sent to the conference. Now we are disbursing those funds which zatasangana nazo tiri ku receiving. Then elders should work closely with the treasurer kuona kuti zvaitwa. This is coming from the church manual, page 81. Then when it comes to the local church, this is disbursements of conference funds. When it comes to disbursing local church funds, it's in harmony with the budget rakavotwa, and also it's in harmony with the authorization of the board or a church business meeting. Not the pastor authorized me to do this. Not the elder authorized me to do this. The pastor works closely with the treasurer, but the authorization comes from the board or the business meeting. How about disbursement of auxiliary organizations? There should be proof that the auxiliary organization met and agreed to withdraw the money from the treasurer. On receiving money from the treasurer, the secretary of the auxiliary organization shall give a proper receipt to the treasurer. Akudzoserawo receipt kuna treasurer kuti zveshuwa treasurer atipa mari yedu yatanga takamuchengetesa. Tiriteseka. We can even go a step further to say, zvatakudzoserai mari yenyu chitipaiwo proof yekuti makazoishandisa chinyi in the interest of the auxiliary organization. Then there are issues of reporting. That has been mentioned, kuti ma reports ngaende ku church board, ku business meeting, and as we do that, let's uphold issues of confidentiality that has been mentioned. Then building projects. It's interesting to know that in our manual it mentions kuti kana ticonsider kutenga kana kuvaka ma buildings or incurring debt, let's cancel with the conference officers before undertaking such obligations. Ma projects mawombai, let's cancel. This is what we want to do. The conference is asking you, do you have the resources? How do you intend to finance it? And so forth. Just have the blessings of your conference before you undertake big projects. Record keeping. Ma records ngachengetwe. Preserve the envelopes to serve as vouchers until all accounts are checked by the conference auditor. My envelopes, in our case, we have that slip, that slip inengeri mukati me envelope. it's supposed to be preserved by the treasurer as evidence of what the treasurer receipted. Then my financial documents, my bills, my cash vouchers, and so forth, they should be kept and filed. Because at the end of each financial year, church manual inoti, my books edu anofanira ku auditwa by the conference auditor and inspected. Right, this one is talking about inspection by the auditor, by the pastor, a first elder, or by other authorized church, by the church board, but should not be available to unauthorized persons. So this is auditing mabuku edu anofanda ku audit kwa. So this is how we just from the surface, from governance, and how these activities take place within the context of the broader picture of governance. But also as a pastor, I should be able to engage with my church members in the financing of the mission theologically, spiritually, experientially, structurally, because our structure yedu ye church inofamba so. Theologically, tithes and offerings inofamba so. Spiritually, this is a divine process. It's a spiritual process. Sometimes we think of this as just fundraising, but it's much higher than that. It's a spiritual matter. I have just 3 slides remaining. So when we engage with church members in financing the mission, let them know that God's plan is to include every member. Money and the way we relate to it has a direct impact of spirituality. We should designate those responsible. Let's find people who are able to educate our members. Apply the appropriate methods of instruction. Sometimes our appeals become emotional and people respond out of an emotional appeal and so forth. Let's employ appropriate methods so that people know what they are doing. Engage church members with the divine plan. Let's have a divine plan, yes, stewardship. Promote compliance to transparency. Present the current and future financial challenges of the church. This is where we are. These are the challenges that we face as a church. Use technology. Use technology. Gospel motivation. It is an act of worship. It's about supporting mission. Remember, church members contribute more when they see results. And also remember, the influence of the pastor on the congregation is key. As the leader is, so is the people. What the priest do, the people also do. May God bless us as we rethink about these matters and many more other aspects which I could have presented, but they are contained within our manuals, our policies, our documents, our guidelines, our practices, our culture as a church. And when we do that, I'm sure God will be pleased with our work and He is ready to open the windows of blessings in abundance. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time.